March 29, 2023. Golden 1 Center. A purple beam rips into the Sacramento sky, and 17,000 people lose it like they've just won a championship. 16 years, the longest playoff drought in the history of American pro sports. And it's finally, actually over. De'Aaron Fox, fastest point guard in the league. Domantas Sabonis is a walking double-double. Mike Brown just ran the most efficient offense the league had ever seen. But how did the Sacramento Kings go from the best offensive teams in the league into a laughingstock in just 3 years? Here's how the Kings went from the future to forgotten. The Kings finally, over 16 years, weren't just sneaking through the playoffs. They're one of the contenders. If you have the best offense in the league, you can call yourself a contender. If you saw the Kings' trajectory, you would be sure the future was bright in Sacktown. Fox and Sabonis were nearing their peaks. Surely it goes upward from here. Nope. 2026, 22 wins, 60 losses, dead last in the Western Conference. A 16-game losing streak that's the worst in franchise history. And DeMar DeRozan, the 6-time All-Star, the guy they traded away a locker room glue guy just to get waived off the roster because nobody in the league would even take his contract for free. Yup. From the beam to the basement in 3 years flat. And the uncomfortable answer is that the collapse didn't start with one bad trade. It started with the drought itself. 16 years is a long time to be irrelevant. It's long enough that an entire generation of Kings fans never watched their team play a single playoff possession. They spent 16 seasons rebuilding. It's long enough that the front office shuffled through 8 head coaches. It's long enough that, in 2018, staring down a top pick, Sacramento looked at a generational cheat code prospect named Luka Doncic and passed on him anyway. Who did they get? Marvin Bagley. That pick summed up the entire Kings organization. When you've been broke for 16 years, you don't think about building slowly. You think about the next meal. Every offseason became a feast. But let's be real, no one wanted to go to Sacramento. It's just depressing to think that the last somewhat star that they've landed in free agency was Vlade Divac in 1998. They needed the draft to bail them out. Instead, it just kept the losing streak going. Every mediocre stretch becomes proof the whole roster needs blowing up. Every asset becomes disposable if it means one step closer to looking like a contender instead of actually being one. Sacramento wasn't drafting and developing so much as surviving one bad news cycle at a time. And by the time the roster finally had real talent on it, the organization had zero patience left to let that talent marinate. Prime example, Tyrese Haliburton. We'll talk about him later. That's the psychology sitting underneath everything that happens next. The Kings didn't just want to win. They needed to prove, to the league, to the fan base, to themselves, that 16 years of irrelevance was just a setback, and not the actual identity of the franchise. That kind of desperation doesn't build a dynasty. It builds an organization that panics the second results dip. Because losing doesn't just feel like losing anymore. It feels like going back to being nobody. And nobody in that building was willing to sit through that again. But in 2022, everything changed. Sacktown was alive. The Kings introduced the Beam. Think of it as a message to the fans that the organization has finally got it together. Right after trading away your future cornerstone. Yup. And you know what? It looks like they made the right choice. For one season. In February 2022, Sacramento made a trade that was, at the time, hated throughout the league. They sent Tyrese Haliburton, a 21-year-old floor general already dishing elite dimes and looking like a future all-star on a rookie deal, to Indiana, along with Buddy Hield in exchange for Domantas Sabonis. Analysts called it a disaster. Daylight robbery. Kings fans were gutted watching a kid with that much aura get shipped out. This is your shot to have an elite household name, and you gave it away. But the front office's logic, whatever you think of the return, was about fit. Fox needed a big who could actually pass, screen, and initiate offense. So De'Aaron could operate as a downhill scorer instead of the lone shot creator on the floor. That's a system decision. That's, we're building a two-man game, not we're chasing a name. And for one glorious season, it worked. The Fox-Sabonis pick and roll became close to unguardable. Fox turning the corner off a Sabonis screen, Sabonis popping or rolling and threading dimes to shooters like Kevin Huerter and Malik Monk spotting up in the corner. Sacramento ran the single most efficient offense in NBA history that season. Fox was automatic in the fourth quarter, hitting so many daggers down the stretch. In fact, he was so clutch that he won the first ever Clutch Player of the Year. Mike Brown got Coach of the Year. Sabonis kept racking up double-doubles like it was nothing. Monk came off the bench like a microwave, heating up out of nowhere to bury a team in a single quarter. The beam got lit. Sacramento finished third in the West at 48 wins, pushed the eventual champion Warriors to 7 games in the first round, and lost Game 7 with Fox playing through a broken finger. You can't even blame the Kings for this one. Steph dropped 50 on their heads. But it felt for the first time in a generation like Sacramento had built something instead of just bought something. Losing to the Warriors in 7 stung. But the fans thought, well, we lost to the eventual champions. Fox and Sabonis were entering their primes. But nobody predicted one of the fastest collapses in NBA history. Because this one wasn't going to end on the court. It was going to end in the front office. And nobody saw that coming. Sacramento had the best offense in the league. You know what they don't have? An ounce of defense. The league adjusted and the cracks showed. Sacramento had no clamps, 24th in defensive rating that title season, and it only got worse from there. In 2023-24, the record actually improved slightly, but the seeding didn't. A 9th place finish, a play-in exit against New Orleans, a heartbreak. The vibe in the building shifted from "we're building something real" to "the window is closing." In just a year, mind you that Fox is just 26 and Sabonis 27. By the summer of 2024, nobody in the building was talking about system fit anymore. They were talking about star power. Sacramento pulled off a 3-team sign-and-trade for DeMar DeRozan, a 6-time All-Star, a certified bucket getter with a deadly mid-range bag who'd finished runner-up for Clutch Player of the Year the season before. The franchise got their first star in decades. To get him, they shipped out Harrison Barnes, the steady two-way glue guy who'd quietly held the locker room together for 5 seasons, plus draft compensation to Chicago. On paper, adding a proven scorer to Fox and Sabonis looked like a super team. In practice, it was 3 ball-dominant players who all needed the rock in their hands and a defense that still couldn't get a stop. Sacramento was dead last in the league in games decided by 5 points or fewer. Imagine having 2 of the clutchest players in the league and still losing on crunch time. Why? Defense. The cracks were personal. Fox, entering the second-to-last year of his deal, declined a contract extension that offseason. He wanted to be somewhere that could compete at a genuinely high level, and he said as much out loud. Instead of the front office focusing on culture and direction, the Kings treated it as a scoreboard problem. You just need more points to outscore your opponents, and just keep adding names instead of answers. 13-18. That was the record when the Kings fired Mike Brown, the same coach they'd crowned a genius 18 months earlier, less than 6 months after handing him a contract extension. Doug Christie, an assistant with 0 head coaching experience, was handed the keys like a hot potato. The architect of the system was gone, and the guy who replaced him didn't have one yet. He's just a hometown hero. De'Aaron Fox, the franchise cornerstone, the guy who'd been the face of the Kings since 2017, the player who'd stood at midcourt under that same purple beam and called the 16-year drought relief, was traded to San Antonio. The guy who lit the beam got sent packing. Not because he was bad, because he wanted to compete at a higher level than Sacramento was showing him. And the front office decided it was easier to cash him in than convince him to stay. Sacramento's wonder boy, the kid they chose over Haliburton, the face they built an entire system around, gone. For a return that read like a business decision, not a goodbye. In return, Zach LaVine, a 2-time All-Star and a legitimate flamethrower from 3, plus a haul of draft picks. On a spreadsheet, that's a win. Scoring, no problem. LaVine was a bucket, but that was not their problem. They've added one, because LaVine, as much as he's a bucket getter, he's also a bucket giver. Guy plays with zero defense. On paper, sure, Domantas Sabonis, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine. And did we mention Russell Westbrook? This team looks terrifying, looks to be the eventual play-in champs. But even though expectations were low, they managed to achieve lower. Here's the thing about building through buying. They don't have chemistry. Sabonis, DeRozan, and LaVine were individually 3 legitimately good NBA players. Together, on a roster that had been reshuffled 3 times in 3 years and handed to a rookie head coach who inherited the job mid-collapse, they weren't a team. They were a collection of respectable names that looked good on a trade graphic and have zero identity. The Kings closed out the 2024-25 season losing in the play-in to Dallas, and the fallout kept coming. General manager Monte McNair, the same executive who'd engineered the Haliburton for Sabonis swap that once looked like a genius, parted ways with the team within days. Sacramento brought in Scott Perry as the new GM and made Doug Christie's interim tag permanent, which is front office speak for "we don't actually know what we're doing, but we're out of options." The 2025-26 Kings opened 8-29, tied for the worst start in franchise history. Worse than any team from the 16-year drought this whole rebuild was supposed to have erased. They dropped 16 straight games between January and February, the longest losing streak this franchise has ever produced. In any era under any owner. Sabonis, LaVine, and mid-season addition DeAndre Hunter all were shut down until the end of the season. The organization gave up on the experiment. Sacramento finished 22-60. Its first 60-loss season since 2008-2009, back when the drought was still not a thing. This past July, DeRozan, the marquee free agent swing that was supposed to push this roster into contention, got waived outright. Because 2 years later, not a single team in the league would even trade for him. Not traded, not bought out for value, just released. There's not even a silver lining, not even the draft. Sacramento walked into this year's draft lottery with an 11.5% shot at the #1 pick and a genuine chance at a top 4 selection. The same kind of top-of-the-board swing the franchise infamously punted on back in 2018 when Doncic was sitting right there. Now they were determined to draft right. Well, the ping-pong balls didn't cooperate. Sacramento fell to 7th, and Scott Perry, the GM, brought in to clean up this mess, had already told anyone paying attention what comes next, flushing the big money contracts of LaVine, Sabonis, and DeRozan, and starting over from the studs. Read that back. The front office is now actively trying to unload the exact 3 assets it burned its franchise soul acquiring. Go back and rewind a bit. In 2023, the Kings had a system, a cornerstone point guard, a coach of the year, and a fan base convinced the future had finally arrived. They had the beam. 3 years and 3 star-chasing acquisitions later, they have a worse record than the drought years. A second-year coach still finding his footing, a GM starting from scratch, and a max contract they had to cut loose for nothing in return. Nothing about Sabonis, DeRozan, or LaVine individually explains that collapse. What explains it is a front office that, scarred by 16 years of irrelevance, mistook the appearance of contention for the actual work of building one. They didn't lose because they made bad basketball trades. They lost because every trade after 2023 was a reaction to fear instead of a step in the right direction. And you cannot buy your way out of an identity crisis by cashing in the guy who gave you your identity in the first place. The Kings didn't get forgotten because they weren't good enough. They got forgotten because the second they got good, they got scared of not staying that way. And that fear is exactly what sent them back to the bottom of a league they just spent 16 years clawing out of. For Kings fans, hate to break it, but you might be looking at another drought.